I sprinted through the sliding doors of Saint Aster Memorial with my mind still dissecting the $1 million contract I had just closed. I only needed to sign admission papers for my father. But before I reached the desk, the head nurse gripped my forearm with bruising force. She dragged me into a blind spot and whispered, "Don't come back! Your husband!" Her eyes darted to the security camera above us in sheer terror. "My name is Harper Reed, and up until 10 minutes ago, my biggest problem was a compliance discrepancy in a merger contract worth $50 million. I adjusted the strap of my bag as I sprinted through the sterilized air of Saint Aster Memorial. My father had been admitted an hour ago with chest pains, and my mind was still half stuck on a conference call I had abruptly ended. I needed to sign his admission forms. That was the only reason I was here. I approached the nurse's station with my ID ready, but I never made it to the counter. Marisol Vega, the head nurse who had known my father for years, intercepted me. She did not greet me. Instead, she gripped my forearm with a strength that bordered on violent and yanked me into the shadow of a linen cart. Her face was pale. She looked nothing like the composed woman I knew. She leaned in close, her breath trembling against my ear. "Don't come back. Your husband—" She cut herself off. Her eyes darted upward to the black dome of a security camera mounted on the ceiling. The fear in her gaze was primal. It sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning. Before I could ask her what she meant, my eyes drifted past her shoulder to the digital roster mounted behind the reception desk. It listed the on-call staff and visiting specialists for the night. Grant Harlow. My husband's name was glowing in bright blue LEDs on the third line. My breath hitched. Grant was supposed to be in Chicago. He had sent me a photo of his hotel view just 3 hours ago. I stared at the screen, waiting for the name to change. Thinking it must be a glitch, it remained steady. Marisol shoved a crumpled piece of thermal paper into my palm. I looked down. It contained a scribbled time, 2 in the morning, and a code that looked like a reference for the basement archives. "Don't let them label you," Marisol hissed. She pushed me away and walked briskly down the hall as if we had never spoken. I stood frozen. I smoothed out the paper in my hand and then clenched it into a fist. I forced my legs to move toward the main administration desk. I needed to see my father. I needed to understand why my husband was on a hospital shift list when he was a financial consultant. The receptionist was away from her desk. I leaned over the high counter. The monitor was active. I expected to see my father's chart. Instead, I saw my own face. It was a profile I did not recognize. The header read, "Patient Reed. Harper." A large red banner flashed across the top of the digital file. "Status unstable. Pre-authorization for involuntary hold pending." I felt the blood drain from my face. I was not a patient. I was the emergency contact. "Ms. Reed." I spun around. A young doctor with dark circles under his eyes held a clipboard. He looked at me, then down at the papers, then back at me with a confused pity. "I am glad you are here," he said softly. "I need to speak with your legal guardian about the transfer instructions. We cannot process the intake without—" "I am the guardian," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I am here for my father. Why is my name on that screen with a red flag?" The doctor blinked. He looked at the monitor, then back at me, his demeanor shifting from pity to guarded professional caution. He took a step back. "I think you should sit down, Ms. Reed. Agitation is one of the symptoms listed in the report." I did not sit down. I backed away. I turned toward the exit, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Near the glass doors of the administrative wing, I saw a flash of familiar blonde hair. Delaney, my sister. She was standing near the elevators. She looked immaculate. Her makeup was flawless. Her dress a shade of blue that cost more than my first car. She was not crying over our father. She was smiling. She was leaning in close to a man in a sharp gray suit, whispering something that made him nod. She looked up and locked eyes with me. Her smile vanished. She did not wave. She did not rush over to hug me. She looked terrified. She turned her back to me instantly and pulled the man toward the elevator bank. I pushed through the automatic doors and burst out into the cool night air. My hands were shaking. I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat, locking the doors immediately. This was not a medical emergency. This was a setup. I looked at the hospital building looming above me. They had my name in the system as a patient. My husband was lying about his location. My sister was conspiring in the hallway. They were trying to build a narrative. They were creating a paper trail to paint me as incompetent. I placed my hands on the steering wheel and took a deep breath. They had made one critical error. They thought I was just a wife and a sister. They forgot that I was the director of risk and compliance for a billion-dollar firm. I did not panic when I saw bad data. I audited it. I started the engine. If they wanted to bury me in paperwork, I would make sure every single document became a weapon. At Cobalt Meridian Integrity Solutions, my job title is Director of Risk and Compliance. In plain English, that means I get paid to assume everyone is lying until the data proves otherwise. I spend my days hunting for anomalies in corporate ledgers and compliance reports, looking for the tiny hairline fractures that signal a structural collapse. I have trained myself to see life as a series of spreadsheets. If the numbers do not balance, someone is stealing. It is a cold way to view the world, but it has never failed me, until I tried to apply it to my own family. My mother, Diane, established the family dynamic 2 decades ago. I was the pillar, the steady paycheck, the one who did not need checking up on. Delaney was the fragile bird with the broken wing. My mother always told me I was too hard on her. She is sensitive. Harper, not like you, Diane would say, usually after Delaney had maxed out another credit card or crashed a car I had co-signed for. I was the safety net. Delaney was the trapeze artist who refused to practice, and Grant was the audience who clapped politely while eyeing the exit. My husband had spent the last 6 months perfecting the role of the emasculated spouse. He constantly spoke about fairness and finding his own footing. The day I brought home my promotion letter, Grant did not buy champagne. He sat me down at our kitchen island, poured himself a glass of whiskey, and gave a rehearsed speech about financial independence. I think we need to separate our finances. Harper, he had said, looking at his glass rather than my eyes. For the sake of our individual identities, I do not want to feel like I am living on your allowance. He expected a fight. He expected me to cry or plead for unity. Instead, I nodded and pulled out my phone to open the banking app. Done, I said. I will transfer your share of the savings to your personal account by morning. Grant had frozen. The whiskey glass stopped halfway to his mouth. He blinked, and for a split second, the mask of the downtrodden husband slipped. He did not look relieved. He looked like a man who had just realized the door he unlocked opened into a brick wall. He did not want fairness. He wanted a clean break without the guilt of being the one to ask for it. Then came the sudden shift in temperature. Delaney, who usually only texted me when she needed bail money or a character reference, sent me a string of heart emojis. She wanted to take me out. She said we needed to celebrate my success at the finest place in the city. It felt performative. She did not want a sister. She wanted an audience. Grant followed her lead. He announced he had made a reservation at the Brass Nocturne for Friday night. He invited my parents. He claimed it was to honor my hard work. But men like Grant do not spend $500 on dinner to celebrate a wife they are planning to leave. They do it to set a stage. I sat in my car outside the house, watching the lights in our living room. I thought about the empty room upstairs we had meant to turn into a nursery. Grant had stalled for years. Not yet. Harper, look at your schedule, he would say with a sigh. A child needs a mother who is present, not one who lives on Zoom. He made my ambition feel like a sin. He made me feel selfish for providing the very roof over his head. But I swore to myself right then that if there was a child involved in this new mess, perhaps a reason for Delaney's sudden glow and Grant's nervous generosity, I would not let an innocent life be dragged into their mud. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat. The hospital incident was gnawing at me. I logged into our health insurance portal. I needed to see if the unstable flag Marisol mentioned had triggered any alerts. I navigated to the Access History tab. My finger hovered over the trackpad. There were 3 logins in the past 48 hours. One was from my phone. The other 2 were from a device labeled iPad, Administrator. I do not own an iPad. Grant does. And he had logged into my psychiatric history file at 3 in the morning, exactly 2 hours after he told me he was asleep in Chicago. I closed the laptop. The audit had begun. I opened a fresh spreadsheet on my secure laptop and named the file Family Truth. It was time to treat my life like a failed audit. I downloaded 12 months of banking transaction history, credit card statements, and digital wallet logs. I did not cry. I did not throw things. I categorized. I assigned color codes to every dollar that left our joint accounts: green for mortgage, yellow for utilities, and red for anything that did not have a receipt. The red column grew alarmingly long. I cross-referenced the dates. Every single time Grant claimed he was out late meeting a client or networking, a cash withdrawal of $200 or $300 occurred near his location. The money then flowed into a third-party digital wallet. I traced the recipient handle. It was not a bar or a restaurant. It was linked to an email address, D. Reed Star Delaney. He was not just cheating, he was subsidizing her existence with my salary. Then I found the anomaly, a recurring monthly charge of $150 labeled C as AUK. I remembered asking Grant about this 3 months ago. He had rubbed his lower back, winced theatrically, and told me it was for therapeutic gym access at the Saint Aster Medical Complex. It helps with the stress. Harper, you should try it, he had said. I picked up my phone and dialed the number associated with the merchant code. I put on my most vacuous, confused voice. Hi, I am calling about a charge on my husband's card, I said when the operator answered. It says as AOX. Is that for the fitness center? He seems to have lost his membership card. No, ma'am. The voice on the other end clipped. That is the billing code for the Saint Aster Auxiliary Legal Services. It covers processing fees for medical records, retrieval, and guardianship filing preparation. My blood ran cold. Guardianship filing, I asked, my voice dropping. Yes. It is a subscription service for ongoing legal documentation regarding patient management. Do you need the extension for the legal department? No, thank you. I ended the call. My hands were trembling, but my fingers flew across the keyboard. I logged into the major credit bureaus. I requested my credit report. There it was. A hard inquiry dated 2 weeks ago from an organization called Sentinel Wealth and Medical Guardianship. They were not just planning a divorce. They were vetting my assets to see if I was worth capturing. They wanted to prove I was mentally incompetent so they could take legal control of my decisions and my bank accounts. I went into emergency protocol mode. I froze my credit at all 3 bureaus. I logged into my company's payroll portal and rerouted my entire direct deposit to a new account at a bank Grant did not know existed. I created a digital vault on a secure cloud server, protected by a 3-layer password. I uploaded the bank statements, the credit report, and the audio recording of the call I had just made. I stood up and walked into the living room to pour myself a glass of water. On the side table, Grant's old tablet sat charging. He rarely used it, claiming it was slow. The screen suddenly illuminated. A notification banner slid across the glass. It was a message from Delaney. Just label her before dinner. I want the house keys by Monday. My instinct was to grab the device and smash it. I wanted to scream, but I stopped. In my line of work, you never touch the original evidence if you can avoid it. Tampering gives the defense an opening. I pulled out my phone. I positioned myself so I wasn't reflected in the screen, but I caught the message clearly in the reflection of the hallway mirror. I snapped 3 photos, one close up, one wide to show the location in our house, and one including today's newspaper on the table to establish the date. I walked back to my office and uploaded the photos to the vault. I did not delete the message. I left the tablet exactly where it was. If they wanted to play a game of legal chess, they had just handed me their queen. I returned to Saint Aster Memorial the following evening, not because I expected answers, but because I needed to see my father. The hospital felt different this time. The corridors seemed narrower, the air heavier with the scent of antiseptic and secrets. I looked for Marisol near the nurse's station, but she was gone. A traveling nurse I did not recognize was sitting at the desk. I checked my phone. There was a missed call from an unknown number at 4 a.m. No voicemail. Just a ghost signal that vanished as soon as I tried to call back. Back at home, the atmosphere had shifted from strained to suffocating. Grant was guarding his phone as if it were a grenade with the pin pulled. He carried it to the bathroom. He slid it under his pillow while he slept. He had also changed his scent. The generic aftershave he had used for a decade was gone, replaced by a niche sandalwood cologne that I knew cost $300 a bottle. "I am going to swing by the hospital," he announced on Wednesday night, adjusting his cuffs in the hallway mirror. "Frank, from the club. He had a minor surgery. I should pay my respects." "Since when do you visit sick friends on a Tuesday?" I asked, looking up from my laptop. He didn't look at me. He focused intently on a piece of lint on his jacket. "Don't start, Harper. I am trying to be supportive. You should try it sometime. God knows you have been distant lately." He left before I could respond. Delaney began stopping by the house with alarming frequency. She brought gifts that were completely outside her usual economic bracket-aged wines, imported chocolates, cashmere throws. She sat on my sofa, crossed her legs, and laughed at Grant's jokes with a familiarity that made the hair on my arms stand up. "You look tired, Harper," she said one evening, swirling a glass of Pinot Noir that I had paid for. "Maybe you should take a sabbatical. Grant was just saying how exhausted you seem. Mentally." I mean, the way she said exhausted sounded less like concern and more like a diagnosis. My mother, Diane, completed the pincer movement. She called me 3 times a day, not to ask about Dad's condition, but to police my tone. "You were so short with Grant yesterday," she scolded me over the phone. "He is trying so hard to keep things normal while your father is sick. Don't make a big deal out of nothing, Harper. Think about the family, for once. Do not be difficult." "I am thinking about the family," I replied, my voice flat. "I am thinking about everything." I needed a reality check, so I met Renee Caldwell for lunch. Renee was the CFO of a logistics firm and the only person I knew who could read a balance sheet faster than I could. I laid out the timeline and the strange behavior. Renee did not touch her salad. She stared at me, her eyes hard and unblinking. "Harper, honey, this isn't an affair," she said, leaning across the table. "An affair is a hotel room and bad jewelry. This is a campaign. He isn't cheating on you. He is liquidating you." That afternoon, I hired Kincaid Ledger and Forensics. They were expensive $500 an hour, but they were discreet. I did not want a private investigator who took grainy photos of people kissing in cars. I needed forensic accountants who could trace digital dust. The preliminary report arrived 48 hours later. It was a PDF of pure devastation. Grant had established a shell company called Harlow Advisory LLC. It had no clients. It had no website. It had 0 income. Yet, every single month, it transferred $3,000 to a luxury property management firm downtown. I checked the address on the lease. It was a penthouse apartment. The tenant listed was Delaney Reed. My husband was paying my sister's rent with money he funneled from our joint savings. But the final item on the report was the twist that made me nauseous. Harlow Advisory LLC had made a one-time, significant payment of $5,000 to a generic vendor code. The forensic team had flagged it as highly suspicious. Recipient Saint Aster Memorial, Discretionary Administrative Fund. Grant was not just sleeping with my sister. He was buying influence at the hospital. He was paying someone to ensure that the paperwork regarding my father and my own sanity went exactly the way he wanted. I sat across from Jules Carter in his corner office, the city skyline reflecting off the glass table between us. Jules was not a comforting lawyer. He was a demolition expert in a tailored suit. I pushed a single sheet of paper across the desk outlining my requirements. I want the divorce petition filed, an emergency asset freeze, and a temporary restraining order regarding my medical records, I said, my voice steady. But I do not want them served at the house. I want a process server on standby for Friday night. Can you get someone who can blend into a high-end restaurant? Jules read the paper and looked up, a faint smile touching his lips. You want a public spectacle? Harper, no? I want a public record. Witnesses prevent gaslighting. I left his office and initiated the second phase of my audit. I sent a formal certified request to the Saint Aster Memorial Records Department. I framed it as a standard billing inquiry regarding my father's care, but I deliberately broadened the scope to include all access logs associated with family identifiers. It was a bureaucratic Trojan horse. 3 hours later, a bike messenger arrived at my office reception with a small padded envelope. There was no return address, just a single black USB drive inside. Marisol had come through. I plugged the drive into my secure laptop. The file opened to reveal a raw system log. I scrolled down the lines of code until I found it. My medical file had been accessed 12 times in the last week. The user ID belonged to Grant. I opened the subfolder Marisol had included. It contained a scanned PDF of a document titled Medical Guardianship Pre-Authorization. My signature was scrawled at the bottom in blue ink. It looked perfect. It was a terrifyingly accurate forgery. I checked the metadata on the file creation. The document was scanned and uploaded at 10 in the morning on Tuesday the 4th. I pulled up my work calendar. At 10 in the morning on Tuesday the 4th, I was leading a compliance training session on Zoom for 200 employees. The session was recorded. I had video proof that I was nowhere near that piece of paper when it was allegedly signed. Got you. I whispered to the empty room. I began to assemble the physical evidence. I took a heavy black binder and labeled the spine Truth File. I inserted the forensic accounting report, the photos of Delaney's texts, the printed system logs from the hospital, and the affidavit I had drafted regarding the forged signature. I included a flowchart linking Grant's shell company payments to the hospital administrator who had flagged my file. It was cold, hard, indisputable data. I called Renee. I need a favor. I said, I need you to come to dinner on Friday. Not to eat. I need you to be the recorder. Check the state laws on one-party consent, but in a public restaurant, there is no expectation of privacy. I need you to capture everything. Say no more, Renee replied, her tone sharpening. I will bring the 4K camera. Consider me your personal body cam. When I got home, Grant was in the kitchen, humming to himself. He looked at me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. I was thinking we should finalize that dinner reservation, he said. For the celebration. I agree, I said, pouring myself a glass of water to hide the shaking of my hands. But book it under your name. Grant, you are the one treating everyone. It should be your night. He puffed up slightly, his ego stroking easily. You are right. It will look better that way. Perfect. While he was in the shower washing off his new cologne, I quietly logged into our home security system. I reprogrammed the smart locks on the front and back doors. I set the new code to activate exactly 5 minutes after we left for the restaurant. I changed the passwords for our shared cloud accounts and the Wi-Fi. I made a call to my father's private nurse to ensure no visitors were allowed without my verbal password. I packed the black binder into my tote bag. I looked around the house that I had paid for. the life I had built, and the man who was currently whistling in the shower while planning my institutionalization. I was ready. If he wanted a show, I would give him a performance he would never financially recover from. The brass nocturne smelled of truffle oil, old money, and impending betrayal. I sat on the plush velvet banquette, watching my family assemble like actors taking their places on a stage. My father, Mark, sat in silence, looking frail and shrinking into his suit. My mother, Diane, was vibrating with a nervous, electric energy, her eyes darting between Grant and the empty chair reserved for Delaney. Grant was playing the role of the benevolent patriarch, ordering a bottle of Cabernet that I knew cost $300. "We need to celebrate new chapters," Grant announced, swirling his wine. "To the future, to freedom." He looked at me over the rim of his glass. The implication hung heavy in the air. He was painting a picture of a man finally breaking free from a cage, and I was the cage. "I just want everyone to be happy," my mother chimed in, turning her gaze on me. "You have been so hard to reach lately. Harper, so cold. A marriage is about warmth, not whatever this arrangement is. You need to learn to be less rigid. You need to think about what a man needs." It was a public trial. They were building the narrative of the neglectful, career-obsessed wife to justify what was coming next. Delaney arrived 20 minutes late. She made an entrance that turned heads, wearing a white dress that was a little too tight and a little too bridal. She kissed Grant on the cheek before sitting down, ignoring me entirely. "Sorry I am late," she said, breathless. "I had to stop by the clinic." She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope. She placed it in the center of the table, right next to the candle arrangement. "Grant and I have news," Delaney said, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "We are expecting. It is early, but it is a miracle." My mother gasped, clasping her hands together as if she hadn't rehearsed this reaction in the mirror. Grant reached out and covered Delaney's hand with his. Delaney looked at me, a smirk touching the corner of her mouth. "And since the baby needs space, and you are always at the office, Grant and I think it is only fair that you move into the condo. We need the house, ideally by next week." The table went silent. My father looked down at his plate. I did not blink. I did not cry. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. "Congratulations," I said. My voice was devoid of any inflection. "I have a few questions for the insurance adjustments. Which obstetrician confirmed the pregnancy?" Delaney blinked. "What, the doctor?" I continued, my voice smooth and professional. "Name, practice affiliation. And what was the date of the last menstrual period used to calculate the due date? I assume you have the ultrasound printout in that envelope." Delaney's smile faltered. She looked at Grant. We just found out." "It is private. Medical records are private." I agreed. "But eviction notices based on occupancy changes require documentation. Did you go to Saint Aster or a private clinic?" "Stop it," Harper Grant snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "This is a happy moment. Stop trying to ruin it with your obsession with details. This is why I am leaving." I set my glass down. I looked Grant dead in the eye. "Don't let them label you," I said softy. Grant froze. His face went slack. It was the exact phrase Marisol had whispered to me, the code phrase for the trap he had set for me at the hospital. He knew that I knew. Across the room, 3 tables away, Renee was holding her phone up, pretending to take a selfie, but the lens was trained directly on us. I let the silence stretch. I let the people at the neighboring tables tune in. "I am not ruining anything." "Grant," I said, "I am just clarifying the timeline." Before he could respond, a waiter in a pristine white jacket approached our table. He leaned down toward Grant, keeping his voice low but audible enough for the table to hear. "Sir, I am afraid there is a problem with the card you gave us for the deposit." Grant laughed nervously. "That is impossible. It is a platinum card. Run it again." "We did, sir," the waiter said, his face impassive. It has been declined. The bank indicates the account has been frozen due to suspicious activity involving a shell entity. Grant's face turned a shade of gray that matched his suit. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked horrified. He wasn't afraid of the bill. He was afraid because he just realized the oxygen line to his entire plan had been cut. The waiter stood awkwardly holding the leather folder containing the bill. Grant was staring at the declined card as if it were a foreign object. The silence at the table was heavy enough to crush bone. I looked up at the waiter and smiled politely. "Please split the check," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the soft jazz music. "Actually, separate them entirely. My husband insisted on financial independence recently. It is only fair that we honor his wish for autonomy. I will pay for myself and my parents. Mr. Harlow and Ms. Reed will handle their own expenses." I handed the waiter my black card. It was a heavy metal card, the kind that invited respect. Grant looked at me with pure venom. He knew he did not have the $2,000 needed to cover the bottle of wine he had ordered to impress my mother. "Harper, stop this," Grant hissed, leaning over the table. "You are embarrassing us. I am simply following your rules." "Grant," I replied. He fumbled with his phone, his hands shaking. He tapped the screen furiously and then shoved the device across the tablecloth toward me. "Fine. You want rules? You want to end this. Sign this. It is the separation agreement. I drafted it this morning. If you sign it now, I will forget about the house. Just sign it so we can leave." I looked down at the glowing screen. The text was small, dense, and deliberately hard to read in the dim restaurant lighting. He was banking on my desire to escape the scene. He wanted me to scroll to the bottom and tap agree, but I do not sign things I have not audited. I pinched the screen to zoom in on the header. It was not a separation agreement. It was a durable power of attorney with medical guardianship clauses. If I signed this, I would be voluntarily handing Grant full control over my medical decisions and my assets. It was the final nail they needed for the coffin they had built at the hospital. I pushed the phone back. I raised my voice, pitching it perfectly so the couple at the next table turned to look. I do not sign legal documents in dark hallways or on 5-inch screens. Grant. And I certainly do not sign away my civil rights over appetizers. I reached under the table and tapped the screen of my own phone. I sent a single word to Jules Carter Proceed. My phone buzzed immediately, but it was not Jules. It was a text from Marisol. "They just filed the Section 5150 report. They are claiming you are a danger to yourself to override your authority on your father's care." The rage that hit me was cold and clarifying. They were using my father's life as leverage. They wanted to declare me unstable so they could make the medical decisions for him, decisions that I suspected involved pulling the plug to access his estate sooner. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the black binder. I did not open it all the way. I just slid out a single sheet of paper and placed it on top of Delaney's fake ultrasound envelope. It was the system log from the hospital server. "Why were you accessing my psychiatric history at 3 a.m, Grant, I asked. "You are a financial consultant. You have no clearance for patient records." Grant stared at the paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Delaney slammed her hand on the table, rattling the silverware. Her mask of the sweet, pregnant sister shattered completely. "Who cares?" she screamed, her face twisting into something ugly. "Just sign the paper if you just let them label you. Everything flows. We just need the signature to get the payout released." The restaurant went dead silent. "Label me," I asked, my voice deadly calm. "Label me as what? Delaney unstable incompetent." "Yes," she shouted, ignoring Grant's frantic hand gestures to shut her up. "You are exhausted. You are crazy. Everyone knows it. Just sign the damn power of attorney so we can manage the estate." I leaned back in my chair. I did not need to say another word. Delaney had just admitted to conspiracy and fraud in front of a room full of witnesses and, more importantly, in front of Renee's 4K camera lens. Grant looked at the entrance of the restaurant. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a cheap suit had just walked in. He scanned the room, locked eyes with me, and nodded. The trap was not just sprung, it was welded shut. I reached across the tablecloth and picked up the envelope Delaney had presented as her victory banner. She watched me with a mix of defiance and anxiety as I slid the single sheet of paper out. It was a photocopy of an ultrasound report. The ink was grainy, the header logo was pixelated, and the patient name had been typed in a font that did not match the rest of the document. I scanned the medical coding at the bottom of the page. My eyes narrowed. "Delaney," I said, my voice conversational. "Why does this medical facility code correspond to a clinic in Arizona?" Delaney's face drained of color. She snatched the paper back, crumbling the edge. It is a national chain," she stammered. "They process data centrally. You don't know everything." "Harper, I know that billing codes are state-specific for insurance purposes," I replied, "and I know that you downloaded this template from a website called Fake a Baby. I recognize the stock image watermark you failed to crop out of the bottom corner." Grant stood up, knocking his chair back. He realized the pregnancy narrative was dissolving before it could garner sympathy. He decided to switch tactics. He leaned over the table, his face contorted with a mock concern that was far more menacing than his anger. "Listen to yourself, Harper," he said, pitching his voice low and soothing, like one would speak to a frightened animal. "You are obsessing over watermarks. You are paranoid. This is exactly what the doctors warned me about. You are having a breakdown." He looked at my parents, spreading his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "She is not well, Diane. I think we might need to make that call to Saint Aster, for her own safety. They have a bed ready in the crisis unit." It was a soft threat wrapped in concern, designed to make me look hysterical and him look responsible. But he had overplayed his hand. I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "Thank you, Grant," I said clearly. "You just admitted on record that you have prearranged a bed for me at a hospital I have not visited as a patient. You just confirmed you are using the psychiatric ward as a strategic tool." My mother, Diane, who had been nodding along with Grant's concern, suddenly froze. She looked from Grant to me. The word label seemed to echo in her mind. She had supported the affair because she wanted Delaney to be taken care of, but institutionalizing her competent, breadwinning daughter was a line she had not anticipated crossing. Grant Diane asked, her voice wavering, "What do you mean?" "A bed is ready. Harper is just tired. She isn't crazy. She is unstable," Diane Grant snapped, losing his composure. "We need to get her signed in so we can handle the finances without her interference. It is the only way to save the assets." My father, Mark, who had been silent all night, suddenly lifted his head. He looked past Grant to where Renee was holding her phone steady. He saw the red recording light. "Stop talking. Grant." My father said. His voice was raspy but firm. "No. Mark, you don't understand," Grant argued, sweat beading on his forehead. "We need legal control. If she is declared incompetent, the power of attorney kicks in automatically." "I said shut up," my father roared, slamming his hand on the table. The outburst startled Delaney. She looked at Grant, her eyes wide with panic. The plan was unraveling, and she saw her prize slipping away. "But you promised," she shrieked, turning on him. "You said it was done. You said she would be in the ward by the weekend, and I would have the keys to the house by Monday. I already scheduled the movers." "Grant," the confession hung in the air. Absolute and damning. Delaney had just confirmed the timeline of my eviction and imprisonment. I reached into my bag and pulled out the heavy black binder. I placed it on the table with a loud thud, right next to Delaney's flimsy, fake ultrasound. "That," I said, pointing to her paper, "is a lie printed on cheap stock." I tapped the cover of my binder. "This is the audit trail. bank transfers, IP logs, and the emails you sent to the hospital administrator to rig my file. I looked at Grant, whose face was now the color of ash. "If you want to discuss our future," I said, "we are going to do it with paper, real paper." I opened the black binder to the first tab. The sound of the heavy plastic page turning was the only noise in the restaurant. I slid a document across the white tablecloth toward Grant. It was the medical guardianship pre-authorization form. "Look at the signature," I said, my voice low and steady. "And look at the timestamp at the bottom, 10 in the morning on Tuesday the 4th. I placed a printed screenshot next to it. This is a still frame from my company's compliance meeting. You can see the clock on the wall behind me, 10 in the morning on Tuesday the 4th. Unless I have developed the ability to be in two places at once. Grant, you committed a felony forgery." Grant stared at the papers. His throat worked as he tried to swallow. I did not give him time to recover. I flipped to the next page. "System logs," I announced, laying the sheet down like a playing card. "User ID Grant Harlow. Action edit field. You accessed my medical profile and changed the status flag to high behavioral risk. You did this at 3 in the morning. I pointed to the line below it, and exactly 1 minute later, you accessed Dad's file, specifically, his end-of-life directives. You were not worried about my mental health. You were clearing the board so you could control his estate once you had me locked away." I turned to the financial section. The spreadsheet was color-coded in red and black. "Follow the money," I said. "Here is a transfer of $4,000 from our joint savings to Harlow Advisory." And here, on the same day, a consulting fee of $4,000 paid to the personal account of a junior administrator at Saint Aster. I looked him in the eye. "That is not a gym membership. Grant, that is a bribe." Delaney let out a choked sob. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "You are so cruel," she wailed. "How can you talk about money when I am pregnant? I am carrying your niece or nephew. I didn't blink." I reached into the binder and pulled out a single sheet of paper with a barcode analysis. "Stop it. Delaney," I said. "I scanned the barcode on your ultrasound document. It does not link to a clinic in Arizona. It links to a template on a website called Fake a Baby. It costs $4.99 to download. You didn't even pay for the premium version to remove the watermark." Delaney's sobbing stopped instantly. She looked up, her face streaked with mascara, her expression shifting from sorrow to pure, naked hate. Grant slammed his fist on the table. The wine glasses jumped. "This is garbage," he shouted, his face turning a deep, blotchy red. "You typed this up." "You are making all of this up to make me look bad. I do not write fiction," I replied coldly. "This is an audit trail. It is generated by the server. It does not have feelings, and it does not know how to lie. But you do." I turned slowly to my mother. She looked sick. Her skin was gray under the restaurant chandelier. "You told me to be nicer," I said to her. "You told me to compromise. Look at this. Mom, you didn't just back the wrong person. You held the gate open while they built a trap to lock your own daughter away." Grant looked desperate. He looked at the camera Renee was holding, then back at me. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, his grip hard and sweaty. "Harper, please," he hissed, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "You are blowing this out of proportion. I just need you to sign the papers so everything can be smooth. We can fix this. Just sign it so it goes away." I pulled my wrist back as if I had been touched by something contagious. "Smooth," I repeated. "You just admitted it. You don't care about my health. You just want the signature." The air seemed to leave the room. My father was breathing hard, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Delaney was frozen, staring at the fake ultrasound paper as if it were a bomb. Grant realized what he had just said. He slumped back in his chair, defeated by his own words. Then, I heard it. The heavy, rhythmic sound of leather shoes approaching on the hardwood floor. I looked up. The process server in the cheap suit was standing right behind Grant's chair, holding a thick manila envelope. Without wasting a word, he dropped it directly onto Grant's dinner plate, covering the untouched steak. Then, he tossed a second, thinner envelope in front of Delaney before handing the third copy to me. "You have been served," the man said flatly. "Petition for divorce, emergency restraining order, and a court mandate for the immediate preservation of all electronic devices pending a forensic investigation." Grant stared at the envelope. His hands were shaking so violently that he could not pick it up. "What have you done?" he whispered. "I did my job." "Grant," I replied, my voice projecting clearly to the silent tables around us. "I audited the situation. 30 minutes ago. I uploaded a digital copy of that binder to the Internal Compliance Board at Saint Aster Memorial. I also forwarded the packet to the State Medical Oversight Committee." Grant's face went from ash gray to a sickly white. He knew that a compliance investigation would not just cost him his reputation, it would cost him his freedom. "And here is the part you missed," I continued, opening the binder to the final tab. "Marisol figured it out. You did not just want my money. You wanted the medical guardianship so you could override my authority on Dad's care. You wanted to pull the plug on him to accelerate the inheritance payout, and you needed me declared incompetent to do it." I slid the final piece of evidence across the table. It was a printed email chain between Grant and a corrupt administrator. "Read it." "Grant." I commanded. Subject line flagging H. "Read." Body text: "Mark her file as high risk, so her testimony regarding the estate will look like hysteria in probate court." My father, Mark, stood up. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. For the first time in years, he looked strong. He looked at Grant with a disgust so profound it felt physical. "You come after my daughter with paper," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "That is lower than stabbing a man in the back. You are a coward." Delaney looked at the process server, then at the binder, and finally at Grant. She realized there was no house. There was no payout. There was only a felony fraud investigation. Panic took over. "It was his idea," Delaney screamed, jumping up and pointing a trembling finger at Grant. "He wrote the script he made me practice the pregnancy announcement. He said if we got the house, he would pay off my credit cards. I didn't sign anything, I was just doing what he said." "Shut up," Delaney Grant roared, slamming his hands on the table. He turned to me, his eyes wild. "She is lying. You are all crazy. You are unstable. Harper, I am calling the police." "Go ahead," Renee said from the side. Grant whipped his head around. Renee held her phone up, the red recording light steady. "I have 40 minutes of 4K video." "Grant," Renee said calmly, "including the part where you admitted to the setup and Delaney admitted to the fraud. The police will love this." Grant looked around the room. The restaurant manager was already speaking into a radio, signaling for security. The other diners were watching him with open hostility. His world was collapsing in real time. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down at the screen. It was a notification from my bank. Alert. All unauthorized proxy attempts blocked. Assets secured. New security protocols active. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I did not need to scream. I did not need to throw wine in his face. The paperwork had done the violence for me. I leaned down close to Grant's ear. He smelled of fear and expensive cologne. "You told me not to come back to the hospital," I whispered. "You do not need to worry. I reported you to the security board. You are the one who will never set foot there again." I turned and walked toward the exit. I did not look back at my mother, who was sobbing silently. I did not look back at Delaney, who was arguing with the process server. I walked out into the cool night air. The streetlights looked brighter than usual. I had walked into that restaurant with a husband and a heavy heart. I was leaving with a divorce pending, a father protected, and a future that belonged entirely to me. The audit was closed. The balance was zero. and I was finally free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below where you are listening from. I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to the Mia Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.